All right, my name is Carlos Cordova, and I am here to discuss the foundation of white supremacy behind the concept of La Raza. When Olin first suggested that I give this lecture today, I was a little bit hesitant because the word raza and Mexican are so interchanged or used almost synonymously that I was afraid that people might take my critique of the word raza as a critique or an attack on the Mexican community, when in actuality that could be furthest from the truth. It's the word raza is used so often that's even like mainstream. It's used in political organizations. You got the La Raza Unida Party. You got the National Council of La Raza. And let's see. The reason why we have to look at this word and kind of critique it is because it's a word that is comes from a European, and if we are to be truly liberated as a people, we have to learn to be able to define ourselves. Europeans have been defining us wrongly for the past 520 years, whether it's the terms Indians, Indios, heathens, savages, illegals, Hispanics, Latinos, even Aztecs is an incorrect word. And to this mix, we must add the word raza. But why raza? In college, I took a course on the African American history and the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. And I read a lot of books about the events and the people that were there. Robert F. Williams, Huey Newton, SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And a lot of inspirational stuff came from that. But it wasn't until a few years ago that I started reading about the Chicano movement of the same period. And when I was reading about that, a certain concept kept coming up in the books I was reading. And it was this concept of raza cósmica. So, for example, in his history of the La Raza Unida Party, UC Riverside professor Armando Navarro writes, Chicanos adopted Mexican philosopher Jose Vasconcellos' call for a raza cósmica with its emphasis on mestizaje, Spanish and indigenous parentage. Another book that I read, Chicanismo, The Forging of a Militant Ethos, writes, Indigenismo represented a part of the new heritage that Chicanos were trying to develop in the 1960s and 70s. The search for this past also took them to Jose Vasconcellos' ideas on the raza cósmica. This concept of a new race of mixed blood origin captivated Chicano activists. To them, Chicanos were the raza cósmica. And this book here is kind of like an anthology, a collection of writings from the Chicano movement and authors and stuff from the 60s and 70s. And one of them was called The Tale of the Raza by Luis Valdez, and it was published in Ramparts magazine in 1971. And Ramparts magazine was kind of like a liberal, radical, I think it was published up in Berkeley or something, anyway, up in the north. And this article was talking about the recent strike in Central California of the grape pickers. And this article says, quote now, La Raza, the race, is the Mexican people. The conquistadors, of course, mated with their Indian women with customary abandon, creating a nation of bewildered half-breeds in countless shapes, colors, and sizes. Unlike our fathers and mothers, unlike each other, we mestizos solve the problem with poetic license and call ourselves La Raza. So when I was reading things like that, it got me to really say, man, I got to read this book, Raza Cósmica. It must have all the answers. So I went down to the library. I got a copy. And just out of curiosity, has anyone here read that book? For those at home, 2 or 3 people. So, and how many times have you heard the term used? A lot of times. So first thing I did when I opened the book was just realize how much racism and pseudoscience this book really is. It's that obvious. So, I kind of was like, this can't be the right book. So I remember asking Olin about it at a powwow in downtown LA. I was asking him about that. And he said, you have to keep in mind that 50 years ago, when the Chicano movement was forming, that they didn't have access to all these books that are here today. They weren't published. They obviously didn't have the internet, so you couldn't go to Amazon or Powell's and order them. You couldn't just go to the library or the bookstore around the corner and find them. So I had to keep that in mind, and I'm going to come back to that in the end, that they didn't have the resources and that's what basically they had to work with. So I'm going to start talking about the book itself now. So the book, La Raza Cósmica, begins by stating that the original inhabitants of Samanahuac, which is all of the Western Hemisphere, were descendants of the lost civilization of Atlantis. In Vasconcelos' view, and Jose Vasconcelos is the author, in case I forgot to mention that, the ancient civilization of Atlantis flourished on the American continent and eventually fell into decline until it degraded to the point of the lesser, quote, lesser Aztec and Inca empires, totally unworthy of the ancient superior culture, end quote. According to Vasconcelos, after its decline, the ancient Atlanteans left America and flourished in other nations such as Egypt, India, and Greece. Eventually, white Europeans inherited the reins of civilization from Greece and again reached the, quote, unforgotten shores of America in order to consummate the task of re-civilization and repopulation, end quote. So basically, according to Vasconcelos, the mission of the whites is to serve as a bridge in the creation of a new race here in America. But what is this new race that Vasconcelos speaks of? Is it really an equal mixture of the, quote, Indian and the Spaniard? No. To say the least, Vasconcelos had a great disdain for all things Nicanlaca. To begin with, it is important to note that the subtitle to his book, La Raza Cósmica, is, quote, Mission of the Ibero-American Race, with Ibero being an obvious reference to the people of Spain. In his book, A Criollo, Ulysses, Vasconcelos writes that his idea of a new race was not based on the idea of regressing to the primitive in quotes, i.e. Nicanlaca, but on building upon the, quote, solid basis of our Spanish tradition, end quote. Now I'm going to use a lot of quotes in this speech, so if you do want to go to the Mexica Movement website, I have the whole article posted there, so you can differentiate between quotes and from what I'm trying to say. So that sometimes it might seem like I'm quoting him but saying it, or something like that, but it's all on the website. Let's see here. Right, now here's a quote from Jose. You cannot find in the peoples of history any that are more limited in the power to change and progress than the aboriginal races of the two Americas. Imagine what our peoples would turn into if suddenly they were pried loose from the European colonial matrix, end quote. According to Vasconcelos, all the Nicanlaca people of Samanahuac have already been completely incorporated into this European matrix. Quote, even the pure Indians are Hispanicized. They are Latinized just as the environment itself is Latinized. Say what one may, the red men, the illustrious Atlanteans, from whom the Indians derive, went to sleep millions of years ago, never to awaken. The Indian has no other door to the future but the door of modern culture, nor any other road but the road already cleared by Latin civilization, end quote. Could Vasconcelos be any clearer? According to his views, the Nicanlaca of Samanahuac have no other option than the option of giving up their languages, their identities, and adopting the Spanish language, the Catholic religion, and to submit to a more advanced European civilization.